Picard Season 3 was right to abandon a Star Trek romance that never should have happened. Star Trek Picard Season 3 abandoned a romance storyline for Admiral Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart, and never quite worked. With a compelling storyline that reunited the crew of the USS Enterprise D, Picard Season 3 was a nostalgic tour de force that became a resounding success. When Admiral Picard receives an urgent distress call from Dr. Beverly Crusher, Gates McFadden, he recruits his best friend and former First Officer Captain William Riker, Jonathan Frakes, to mount a rescue mission. Picard and Riker then commandeer the USS Titan, much to the annoyance of its current commander, Captain Liam Shaw, Todd Stashwick. When Jean-Luc and Beverly reunite, Beverly reveals that she had given birth to Jean-Luc's son, Jack Crusher, Ed Spielers, over 20 years before. Picard and Crusher danced around one another throughout Star Trek: The Next Generation, never officially becoming a couple despite their obvious feelings for one another. They did, however, come together sometime after Star Trek Nemesis, before going their separate ways and spending the next 20 years apart. Picard Season 2 hinted at another romantic partner for Jean-Luc, but the plot was mostly abandoned in Season 3 in favor of this long-established relationship. Star Trek Picard Season 3 pretty much abandoned the previous season's Laris romance. Orla Brady's Laris joined the cast of Star Trek Picard in its first season as an employee of Admiral Picard, who helped run his family's vineyard. Former members of the Romulan Tall Shire, Laris and her husband Jabin, Jamie McShane, both became close friends with Picard, offering listening ears and advice. Sometime after the events of Picard Season 1, Jabin passed away, leaving Laris a widow. By the beginning of Picard Season 2, about a year had passed since Jabin's death, and Laris had grown closer with Picard. Despite his apparent feelings for Laris, Picard was reluctant to open himself up to a romantic relationship. After confronting his childhood trauma in Star Trek Picard Season 2, Jean-Luc felt ready to embark on a romance with Laris, and he asked for a second chance. At the beginning of Picard Season 3, Jean-Luc was planning to travel with Laris to Chaltech 4, until he received the distress call from Beverly Crusher. From that point forward, Laris plays no part in the season's storyline, as the focus shifts to the reunited TNG crew and the Borg/Changeling plot. While Jean-Luc does not renew his past romance with Dr. Crusher, he makes no mention of Laris or their relationship. Star Trek's Picard and Laris never really worked, while Picard and Laris make a cute couple at a cursory glance. The circumstances of their meeting make the entire romance plot somewhat questionable. Not only was Laris technically Picard's employee, but she also worked and lived there with her husband for several years. In Star Trek Picard Season 1, Picard appeared to be close friends with Jabin, seeing him as someone he could confide in and go to for advice. This backstory makes any love story between Jean-Luc and Laris feel messy, which also seems out of character for Picard. Picard's romance with Beverly Crusher also had its complications, which is part of the reason why the two never officially got together. Plus, it took Jean-Luc years to admit even to himself that he had feelings for Beverly. The timeline of Star Trek Picard made Picard and Laris's storyline feel too rushed and not fully developed. While the hints of romance worked for the storyline of Picard Season 2, the backstory and context from Picard Season 1 soured any potential love story. The Star Trek franchise has always been about bold exploration of space, of ideas, and of relationships. In its long history, the series has navigated many complex themes, from the ethics of artificial intelligence to the role of diplomacy in galactic politics. But when it comes to romantic relationships, Star Trek has often struggled to strike a balance between compelling drama and forced sentimentality. Nowhere is this more evident than in the ill-fated romance between Jean-Luc Picard and Dr. Beverly Crusher. Star Trek Picard Season 3, however, made the right decision by abandoning this relationship, one that never quite made sense and, in hindsight, never should have happened. The Picard-Crusher romance was always a strange narrative decision, especially given the way their relationship was treated throughout Star Trek The Next Generation TNG. The two characters were portrayed as close friends, colleagues, and confidants, but any romantic tension was largely unexplored for most of the series. This was especially notable in the early seasons, when Picard's stoic demeanor and commitment to duty seemed at odds with any notion of romance. Crusher, for her part, was deeply dedicated to her role as the ship's doctor and a mother to her son, Wesley. While there were occasional moments of flirtation, such as their shared history as former lovers, the series never seemed to fully commit to making their relationship the focal point. Season 3 of Picard, however, brought the two back together in a way that many fans anticipated but few truly wanted. By revisiting their past, the show seemed to imply that there was unfinished business between Picard and Crusher. This was encapsulated in the reveal that Beverly had kept a secret from Jean-Luc, a child of his, who was later revealed to be their son, Jack Crusher. While this plotline provided some dramatic moments, it felt forced, as if the show had decided to bring back a romance for the sake of fan service, without fully justifying why these two characters needed to pursue this relationship in the first place. In many ways, the writers of Picard Season 3 made the right decision by not allowing the relationship between Picard and Beverly to take center stage. The exploration of their past and the reveal of their son was important for both characters' arcs, but it never had to be rooted in romance. The dynamics between Jean-Luc and Beverly were far more interesting when they were two people navigating a deep platonic friendship, each supporting the other through immense challenges. Beverly, the brilliant and compassionate doctor, and Picard, the often emotionally distant but deeply caring captain, had a strong professional bond that was far more compelling than any romantic tension could have been. Furthermore, the forced nature of the Picard-Crusher romance only detracts from the greater narrative of Picard Season 3. The show was, at its core, about reconciliation and legacy. Picard's relationships with his old crew members, including Riker, Worf, and Data, were key to the series' emotional impact. By focusing on these ones that had been built over decades of shared experience, the show allowed for more meaningful character development. The deep emotional beats of Season 3, particularly the return of the Enterprise D crew and the final moments of Data's story, resonated because they were grounded in friendship and mutual respect, not romantic entanglements. Romance, when done well in Star Trek, has always been a vehicle for exploring character growth and human connection. The relationship between Kirk and Spock in the original series, for example, was never about romantic love, but about the deep bond between two individuals with vastly different approaches to life. Similarly, the relationship between Janeway and Chakotay on Voyager was rooted in mutual respect and the shared struggle of commanding a starship in deep space, with any romantic overtones largely left unaddressed. These examples prove that Star Trek is at its best when it focuses on the bonds that transcend romance, instead exploring the complexity of human connection through friendship, loyalty, and shared experience. The decision to de-emphasize the Picard-Crusher romance in Season 3 of Picard also highlights the evolving nature of character arcs in a franchise that has often leaned too heavily on nostalgia. Jean-Luc Picard's evolution from the cold, methodical captain of the Enterprise to the more emotionally open and introspective figure seen in Picard was a compelling narrative journey. This evolution was always going to be more meaningful if it was grounded in the relationships he developed over the course of his life, rather than being shackled to a romance that was never fully explored in a satisfying way. Ultimately, Picard Season 3 did not need to indulge in the idea of Picard and Beverly rekindling a romance. The show's strength lay in honoring the past while moving forward, and by focusing on the themes of legacy, redemption, and familial bonds, it crafted a far more powerful narrative than any forced romance could have. The decision to abandon the Picard-Crusher love story was a testament to the franchise's growth, showing that Star Trek could continue to evolve without resorting to tired romantic tropes.